Well, I'm very pleased to introduce Peter Julian. Peter was first elected Member of Parliament for Burnaby New Westminster in 2004, re-elected in 2006, and again in 2008. So I'm assuming you've been doing a good job. You must be, if you got re-elected.
I hope folks feel that way, yeah.
He also served as critic on international trade, and he's actually here in his capacity as NDP critic for international trade to talk about the Canada-European Trade Agreement. I know it has another name, and I'm sure you'll correct me on that. One of the things that really interests me, which I learned about Peter Julian, was that he was actually a founding member of the Council of Canadians. Yay! For those of you who don't know about the Council of Canadians, there is a table outside that has been set up. It's really an organization that we should be very, very proud about in Canada. It's quite unique. It's citizens came together when NAFTA was proposed and have since acted as a government watchdog, but as well as an advocacy group for social, economic, and environmental justice. I know when as a member of the Council of Canadians, I was at the conference a couple of years ago, and Maud Barlow, who has been one of the main spokespeople for the organization, came out very strongly, very strong worries about the Canada-Europe trade agreement. So, even though you're an NDP, it's as impressive that you were a member of the Council of Canadians. And the other thing is, Peter was previously a financial administrator, community activist, and manual laborer. So what did you do as a manual laborer?
Lots of different stuff. Dug ditches, packed plastic, unloaded rail cars.
Good. Okay, you passed.
It's good for the physique.
It is, it is. Peter also served as Executive Director, as I say, of Council of Canadians and former Executive Director of the Western Institute for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. So he's got a lot of experience, a lot of background to his credit, and I am very pleased to introduce him and have him here speak to us.
Thank you very much, and thank all of you for coming out tonight. This is, given this is a Saturday night in Kelowna, I appreciate your presence. I wanted to start off by thanking Tisha and the local riding association for organizing this night with the involvement of the Council of Canadians, my old friend Karen. And I'd just like to say, if Tisha can show this much energy and diligence to organize a community event, just imagine what she'd be able to do as Member of Parliament in this area. She'd be phenomenal. So thank you. Yesterday we saw something profoundly significant, and that was after 18 days of peaceful demonstrations, after the deaths of 300 demonstrators, after the disappearances of nearly 1,000 individuals, but with incredible determination, we saw the Egyptian people rise up and throw out a despot who had been a dictator for over 30 years, and President Mubarak left his office yesterday and was basically thrown out by the Egyptian people. And I think that's something we should pay tribute to. The Egyptian people were that courageous in standing up for democracy.
Right on.
And I think it's an important point to start because we know how important democracy is. And we know that democracy can be stifled and crushed by secret police and by violence. But we also know that democracy can be signed away with a simple stroke of a pen. And what I'd like to talk to you about tonight is why I think the Canada-European Trade Agreement, also known as CETA, because that's the sort of standard title now that activists are adopting across the country, poses a threat, fundamental threat to our democracy and also a threat to our quality of life here in Canada. But before I start to talk about the details of CETA, and what I'm going to do is touch upon 8 areas within CETA that I think are fundamentally dangerous to the future of our country. I'd like to actually take the other side, the conservative side, and talk about the 4 myths that they put out, the 4 elements that they put out to justify the signing of these kinds of trade agreements. Start off with myth number 1 that you hear about all the time in the media, not the independent media of course, but in the corporate media, and that is that free trade agreements have brought unprecedented prosperity to Canada. You hear it all the time. We hear it from lobbyists, we hear it from right-wing pundits, we see it all the time in big media.
For the banks.
Yes, yeah. And StatsCan has actually been tracking what has happened to Canadian income levels, Canadian family incomes, since the implementation of the first free trade agreement, Canada-US Free Trade Agreement in 1989. This is what they found. Over the last 20 years, the middle class, that's families earning between $40,000 and $60,000, have lost on average about 1 week of income for each and every year since the Canada-US Free Trade Agreement was implemented. Now that means they're working 52-week years, of course, they're only being paid for 51. So there's been a significant erosion of income. For the lower middle class, those are families earning between $20,000 and $40,000 a year. They've actually lost twice as much. They've lost on average 2 weeks of income for each and every year since the Canada-US Free Trade Agreement was implemented. And the most significant impact, won't be a surprise to you, is among the poorest of Canadians, families earning less than $20,000 a year. They've lost on average a month of income for each and every year since 1989. A month of income. Now just imagine trying to stretch your family income for that month. It's like you're being not paid for a month out of every year. Now, there is another part of the overall income levels that has changed dramatically, and that is the wealthiest of Canadians. Their income has skyrocketed. The top 20%, the wealthiest 20% of Canadian families, have seen their incomes go up by 35%, and now the wealthiest Canadians take most of the Canadian income pie. They take 52% of all Canadian income. So we can see that, yes, free trade has brought unprecedented prosperity, but only to the wealthy in this country, not to the rest of us. And the impact has been particularly profound among the youth of our country. Now, as you may know, what we've seen with starting wages now, they are lower, much lower on the job market than they were 10 or 20 years ago. Most jobs that are created are actually part-time or temporary. And most jobs that are created don't come with pensions.